Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll just give everybody a few more minutes here to join the webinar. So just be a minute before we get underway here. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is John Green with Latitude Consultancy. I'm based in our Vancouver, Canada office, and I have my colleague, Dom Barnes, joining us today, who's based in our London office. And today we'll be talking about the Caribbean Citizenship by Investment Program and upcoming changes to the programs. So a little bit about Latitude Group before we get into the specifics of the changes and the programs themselves. So Latitude Group, we've been in operation now for 11 years. We're helping private clients with both citizenship and residence by investment programs. We also help with citizenship by descent for a few programs in Europe. And not only do we help private clients, but we also have a government advisory team. To date, we've helped over 6,500 clients with various citizenship and residence by investment programs. And we're also proud representative regional offices in both the Caribbean and the Middle East for the Investment Migration Council. So this is a volunteer organization that helps sets the standards and ethics of our industry. And to give you a bit of a viewpoint of our global presence, we're in over 25 offices around the globe. As I mentioned, I'm up in our Vancouver office, helping to help oversee our North American operations. Dom's in our London office. We also have offices across the world, including Miami, Cayman, Dubai, Malta, etc. So just touching on this is a quick slide on our government advisory experience. So our team can go in and either help a country fine tune their existing program to make it more competitive, or we can help a country start a program from scratch, everything from passing the necessary legislation to enact a new program, helping hiring the right staff, designing the application forms and the due diligence processes. So that gives us a very unique insight into the industry with only a handful of companies can do and have that experience. And I wanted to share this slide as I think it's very relevant today with high net worth families across the globe. Over 19% as a global average are looking at applying for a second passport in 2024. And maybe surprising to some, this number increases to 26% in North America. And I've been in the industry now for 15 years. And when I first started, there wasn't very much demand coming from North America. A lot of people would give me a blank stare when I explained what we did, assisting with investment migration programs. And we always kind of got that blank stare. Why would an American ever need a second citizenship? But that kind of mentality has really changed over the last few years. It really started to see a change about 7.5 years ago. And it hasn't slowed down, especially during COVID. The demand for these type of programs from our US clients has skyrocketed. And we don't see it slowing down anytime soon. And that's why we have a presence. We've opened an office up in the United States and in Miami and are growing our team from that office. And one of the things that we like to say with the second citizenship, it's almost akin to a modern insurance policy. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And real quickly on this slide, just going over the financial planning processes for high net worth clients. A lot of people have thought, of course, of the overall financial structure. Everybody's heard of estate planning, tax planning, education planning for their children. asset and portfolio diversification, insurance, real estate, etc. But what's becoming more prevalent than ever is the citizenship and residency planning. So we're seeing estate planners, lawyers, family offices are needing to add this to their overall repertoire. And that's where a company like Latitude can come in and provide advice on the top citizenship and residence by investment programs worldwide. And this is just an acronym we use. It's called SMILE. So it's benefits of a second citizenship and why our clients are seeking it. Of course, safety and security. So freedom of movement, which provides a secure and truly permanent alternative place to go if needed. Investing in the future as an insurance policy and diversified portfolio of nationality. So it's not just relying on one citizenship or nationality and one government to look after you in times of need. You diversify and you're having more options. Of course, many of our clients are looking for a lifestyle, so higher quality of life, maybe better climate, public services, environment, access to healthcare that's perhaps more affordable. And a big one, of course, is education and employment. So providing more options for your family to be educated abroad or employment opportunities abroad as well. And then a big one is the mobility. So traveling to countries previously restricted by time-consuming visa applications.
And just to interject there, John, as well on that point, we do practice what we preach at Latitude. Many of us do hold multiple citizenships, multiple resident statuses, and as someone who does as well, I genuinely do feel diversified. I feel like I don't have to rely on one state, one jurisdiction. I have many options, and this whole rationale of de-risking and how do I add to my portfolio of residence and citizenship is really in the forefront of people's minds now. It's a very mainstream conversation. The more you have, the more equipped you are, and we do practice what we preach in that sense.
That's a great point, Dom. Thank you. Freedom. I think a lot of us pre-pandemic did not think that a global pandemic would be a reason to hold a second citizenship, but that certainly became important. I would say when COVID first happened in early 2020, we didn't know what was going to happen with the industry. But after about 2 months, we saw an extremely sharp uptick in demand for our services. And a big reason for that, if you look at the United States during the height of COVID, many countries banned Americans from traveling because of the way they felt that the COVID was being not taken. Maybe it was spreading quite drastically. But those who had a second citizenship did not have such restrictions. So many you had a small, peaceful Caribbean country passport, you could still travel worldwide. You weren't restricted just based on your nationality. So it really became another reason why you want to diversify and hold a second citizenship. I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of the programs. Citizenship by investment really has been around since 1984 when St. Kitts and Nevis first launched their program. We saw it start to become more popular, I'd say, in about 2008 when they amended their program. And again, we've seen it just continue to increase over the years. And certainly post-COVID, as I mentioned, that increased demand substantially. Now, the programs over the years have changed and tweaked how they qualify or investment amounts, etc. And what we've seen is some pushback from other nations or organizations on the Caribbean programs. And I think the EU has put some pressure, even the US has put some pressure on these countries. And so back in 2023, the 5 Caribbean citizenship by investment countries, that's Antigua, Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts, and St. Lucia, agreed to the 6 principles. And this is really the first agreement of all 5 countries. And one of the most important on this was the treatment of denials. So if you are denied from one program, you are no longer eligible to apply to another. And so this speaks very important point is you want to choose a service provider who's going to maximize your chances of a successful application. Because if you leave something out or the government feels you're hiding something, that could be grounds for denial, and then you would not be eligible to apply it for another Caribbean country. So this is a relatively new principle that came in 2023. Also, the virtual interviews is something they've implemented as of December of 2023. So this is part of their due diligence check. So after you've gone through the 90% of the due diligence process, as they're reviewing your application, you'll be required to do a virtual interview. It's mostly to confirm identity, ask a few questions that match your answers on your application, etc. Additional checks, of course, the JRCC is the Joint Regional Communication Center in the Caribbean. So all applications now are routed through them as well, and so they can provide their feedback on their international checks, which helps to harmonize. Regular audits of the program, treatment of Russians and Russians are, as they're no longer eligible to apply for these programs at this time, and of course, retrieval of passports. So those changes happened in 2023, but what have we seen in 2024? Well, this is a historic memorandum of agreement has been signed by 4 of the 5 citizenship countries. So the prime ministers of Antigua and Barbuda, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, and St. Kitts and Nevis have signed this memorandum of agreement to harmonize their programs to ensure the integrity, long-term sustainability, and cooperation of best practices. So this is, again, security, regulation, transparency. They're sharing information with each other. They're setting the same standards from a due diligence perspective and some common protocols for security checks. The biggest change that's going to affect applicants, of course, is the price change. So this is huge, as the increase and the harmonization of the minimum price is going from at least 100,000 to 200,000 by June 30th, plus additional fees. And this is for the single applicant. We expect the family's price will also increase even higher. And of course, the real estate price will be increasing as well, which we'll get into in a few minutes. Again, this price is upcoming. When exactly it'll happen, we can get into a little bit later in the presentation. But now I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Dom. And just to let everybody know, we're going to be taking questions at the end of the presentation. So please hold your questions till the end. Feel free to ask them in the chat, and we'll be addressing them at the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Dom to talk a little bit about the specifics of these 5 Caribbean citizenship programs.
Thanks, John, for the intro. And yeah, just to sort of dovetail on what John's saying there, you know, these superpowers now having the mainstream conversation with these heads of units and heads of countries is a good thing, right? It's a mainstream conversation, you know, dating back to February last year, when you have, you know, the Deputy Assistant to the US Department of Treasury meeting with them. You then had the EU representative of the visa policy meeting. So at least everything is now on the table, and there are sensible discussions happening, all in the best interests of preserving these small economies, which rely heavily on this FDI. You know, some of the FDI accounts for over 30% of the GDP of some of these countries, so they need to be structured correctly. So first of all, you know, these are individual sovereign countries, right? But they do have a union power. They have the OECS, Economic Union, which is the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And what this means is, if you become a citizen of one of them, so let's say I become a citizen of Antigua and Barbuda, when I enter that country, okay, with my with my Antiguan passport, I get that stamped with the OECS stamp. I then have the right to live in the other union member states. So a little bit like the European Union in terms of that free access and settlement and living across the union, you also have that in the Caribbean. So a lot of our US clients now who are actually going one step further and spending time in these countries, they are, you know, managing their time around around each country. So it's a powerful thing that you have 1 equals over 7 in terms of your access and rights within a country. So if we go on to the next slide now for Antigua. Have some nice pictures, being a very gorgeous island. Well, Antigua I went to in May last year, and many of our employees have visited and lived. The key thing with Antigua in terms of if we're looking at unique aspects of each country, right, which I'll do in these slides, there's no point giving you A to Z of what they do and what the requirements are. I'll give you unique points about them. Uniquely for Antigua, it has the only residence requirement. So by that I mean, once you become an Antiguan citizen, okay, so we've built your file, we've submitted your file, we wait, 4 to 6 months, we get the approval, you make the donation, okay, you then have your citizenship certificate, which then gets used to issue the passports. Within the first 5 years of having that certificate, you're going to have to show that you've done at least 5 days visitation in Antigua. Okay, so I just had a client from South Africa do their visit. They ended up spending 2 weeks there because they said, well, let's do a holiday. And they were assisted by our on the ground team there, and they signed the oath of allegiance. And it's a very smooth process. And I think that I'm actually, in agreement with that kind of policy because it creates a bit more nexus to the country. And obviously for our US clients who are flying in from Miami, 3 hour flight, it's easy, right? They say, look, fine, I'll be there as soon as I get my citizenship. So that's the unique thing about Antigua. It's the only one out of the 5 that has that visitation requirement. In terms of the country itself, I would say it's the most developed in terms of the trimmings it has. Tourism is a major industry, the major industry in Antigua. So you have the resorts, the beach clubs, the large moorings for super yachts. So it has the trimmings that appeal to our US clients who are actually spending more time on the island. And again, I can attest to that. I was there last year. And it's a very diverse island. You have in the south east a little bit more sort of laid back and not too much development going on, nice quiet beaches. And then in the north of the island, St. John's is the capital, where more of the business goes on. And down the west coast is sort of, spotted with resorts. So for our US clients who are now saying, yeah, I'm going to spend a bit of time on one of these islands, they are usually ending up in Antigua because of the trimmings. And really, not really unique just to Antigua, but again, another thing to think about, it's very refreshing going from a country like the US, right, which requires a lot of financial reporting, a lot of state influence. These are completely agnostic countries, right? They ask very little of their citizens. So, I have conversations with these US clients saying, I just like the idea of going to Antigua and forgetting about all the geopolitical nonsense going on. I'm working from my laptop in the beach club, and all the noise is gone. It does genuinely offer that sort of peace of mind alternative destination. And yeah, the family structure here, yeah, with Antigua, I'd probably say the third key thing about it is the way the contribution is structured. 100,000 covers the main applicant and 3 dependents, so it's known as the family friendly file because of that. So again, a lot of our clients are family files, right? It's mum, dad, and 2 kids. So again, because of that structure of 100,000 covering 4, it's a family friendly file. But remember, that is only for this, current legislation, and I'll talk about the increases later. Who qualifies there? You can see main applicant is the investor, right? That's the person with the funds. That is our client, and then they're adding on their eligible dependent, spouse, children up to the age of 30, parents, grandparents, and importantly, siblings. So Antigua and Grenada share that privilege. They both allow siblings to be added to an application as long as there's a nuance in the eligibility. So, for example, I believe, John, I think Antigua says that you don't have to demonstrate financial support, and I think Grenada is slightly more expensive.
That's exactly right. So what makes Antigua very unique is that they treat siblings who are not married and do not have children as a regular dependent. They don't charge an additional fee.
Right.
So it can make it a very cost-effective program compared to any other, and certainly can expand who you can include on your application.
Great. Okay, next slide. And here we have the headlines of, what are the most popular ways to acquire the citizenship through the legislated donation or through the real estate. And again, that's 100,000 covering a family of 4. And as we keep saying to our prospective clients, it's 100,000 at the moment, but we could see June 30th, maybe a little bit of a spill into July, not sure, but let's be prudent and work towards that June 30th. You're going to be paying 200,000 for that increase. So certainly time is of the essence with these files. Real estate, we haven't had any official release from the CIU in terms of, yes, we will increase it to 400,000, but you'd make the assumption that if we're doubling the contribution, we double the real estate to keep that competitive price difference. Because if they were the same, people would just obviously buy real estate. And there's more to think about real estate. It doesn't actually appeal to every investor. I'll get into that maybe later on.
Yeah, and Dom, just to add to this, so the main options are the donation, which is in Antigua is known as the National Development Fund. Then you have the real estate, which must be an investment into a project approved by the government. So not all real estate will qualify, and that's important. So it must be in a government approved development. And generally speaking, those are tied to a hotel. What's also unique in Antigua is they have an option known as the University of West Indies Fund. So this is only open to families of 6 or more applicants. However, it is very cost effective. So it becomes the most cost effective option for large families. Hence, again, another reason why it's a friendly, family friendly destination.
Yep.
Is that University of West Indies Fund for large families. And sometimes for clients, they'll maybe have a family of 5 and they decide to add their sibling because it actually makes it less expensive when you calculate the differences between the National Development Fund and the University of West Indies. Because again, you need to reach that minimum 6 family members for the university fund option.
Exactly. And also as well, with the the real estate side, I'd say overall most of our clients go for the contribution for different reasons. But yeah, I mean, you have some clients say, oh, I'd rather have a passive overseas earning suite, right, in a hotel that's getting me a bit of yield. I can sell it in 5 years, hopefully for the same or more. But some clients say, look, I don't want to be, handcuffed by that list of developments. I want to buy a 5-bedroom villa. Well, fine, do the contribution, become a citizen, go and buy what you want, if you are actually retiring there. So we're seeing a lot of, retirees going beyond South Florida and going, yeah, I'm going to buy a huge house in Antigua, right, once I'm a citizen. So Dominica, again, another one of the CBI islands. It's really known as being a little bit less developed. Okay, so looking for that more kind of nature reserve, quieter life. A lot of the resorts that are set up there are very sort of eco-friendly looking resorts, built right into the lush green tropics. So for some investors, certainly from the West Coast, you're sort of, yoga sort of types, they're looking at these options saying, yeah, I like a bit of that. There's a bit of West Coast, in the Caribbean. But it's really from a pricing perspective, it's always been very popular for our main applicant only clients. So you have Antigua, family friendly. Dominica, main applicant only, and that's because of the way it's structured. As soon as you start adding on dependents, the contribution increases, right? So for family of 4, you're looking at over 170,000, for example, versus 100,000 for Antigua, just for the contribution. As you can see there, as I said earlier, Antigua is unique in its day count of residents. You could say Dominica as well. Not only is it cost effective for one person only, it's pretty quick in the grand scheme of things. We are seeing, in general, a processing time, and by processing time we mean from submitting the file to the government getting the approval letter. So that's all controlled by the government. We can obviously nudge the government every now and then, say, hey, how are we doing with this client? But it's really, we can't control that timeline. So we're giving you averages here, around 4 to 5 months in terms of the processing. Different to Antigua, Dominica, another plus point it has is citizenship by descent. So if you become a citizen of Dominica through the program, that citizenship can be passed down to future generations because in their nationality law, they have citizenship recognized by descent as an applicant that came through the program. Whereas in Antigua, the nationality law doesn't recognize someone coming through the program by investment being able to pass that down. In Antigua, you can add dependents to a closed file, but it's going to be under the program. So you're going to be paying 17 to 40,000 per person, depending on how many were in the first application. With Dominica, if you're saying, I'd rather pay a little bit more and maybe have that legacy value, right, that yield down the line, then maybe that's something we consider. And whenever we have these conversations, we have a very holistic consultation at the start and say, what exactly do you want? Is this important to you? You know, if it's an elderly couple, they say, no, that means nothing to me. I'm not having any more kids. So they do Antigua. So all these things we weigh up. Unfortunately, Dominica did lose visa-free access to the UK and Ireland. So by that, I mean you have a passport from Dominica because you're a citizen. You can't now enter the UK visa-free. You've got to apply for a visa. Same with Ireland. It just shows that these countries are treated as individual sovereign states, and it's up to them to keep these waiver agreements live and have constant back and forth report, you know, to keep their diplomatic arrangements at a good level. Again, who qualifies? Main applicant, that's our client, that's the investor, that's the person showing the source of funds, the source of wealth, everything that we go into detail at the start of our consultation, because not only being clean background or clean character, you have to demonstrate source of wealth and source of funds. So we'll run through that with our clients to make sure it's exactly how we need to present it. You have here, yeah, again, parents, grandparents, quite a strange one there that they brought in, I think about a year ago, unmarried daughter under the age of 25. Quite a strange little addition. But again, maybe not that relevant because of the pricing, people are only really doing this as one applicant only. So headlines there again, 100,000 at the moment, 200,000 coming soon. Family of four, 175. So, and that's just the contribution, as I said. It's not like Antigua where it's 100,000 for the four. You start adding on with each person you add. Real estate, 200,000. Again, no official release on whether that is changing, but if we use logic, it's, yeah, it has to. And let's stay tuned for that update. Grenada is an island that we have multiple colleagues who've lived and worked in Grenada. One of them assisted with the setup of the unit in Grenada. So, like John said, the form filling, the organizing of the staff, so they know it very well. I'd probably say somewhere in the middle between Dominica and Antigua in terms of its developed and the trimmings it offers. Again, a gorgeous island that is lush in greenery and lush in spices. And importantly as well, geographically, it is actually below the hurricane belt. You know, you've got to think the way that these islands are positioned. You know, we're not going to lie to you; they're in hurricane territory. You know, 2017, 18, we saw some very destructive hurricanes. But again, these programs shone through. The St. Kitts and Nevis government set up a hurricane relief fund, pulled in loads of investment. They could then repair the damage. So another example of how beneficial these programs are if used correctly. 8 months processing. Yeah, I'd probably say that's on a good day. You know, sort of 8 to 10 months. We're sort of seeing again. These are kind of live times, right? So it's hard to give you exact pinpoint, but we do say Grenada is one of the slower options. The CEO of the CIU, Citizenship by Investment Unit, Thomas Anthony, has come out and he's produced figures saying we're getting through the backlogs. So they are, you know, trying to get through the backlogs. Some unique aspects of Grenada. E2 treaty with the US. Now, for US citizens, that only matters if you were to go that one step further and renounce your US citizenship, maybe for taxation. It's not a, you know, we are seeing it. But we have clients who are residents of the US and they'd like a 5-year block of residence, which they can renew and renew and renew. And the E2 treaty allows that. So the E2 treaty has different countries, okay? And if you become a Grenadian citizen, you'll then party to that treaty because that nation is in the treaty. And it's usually an investment into a franchise, 100,000 plus, okay? And then that allows you to apply for the E2 treaty visa. There is a little bit of speculation about how long that'll last now, because 2022, Biden put through an omnibus bill and it had that inside it. And they wanted to change the domicile requirement. So that would mean to be able to apply or submit for this visa, you have to be domiciled in your country of treaty. So that means living in Grenada for 3 years before you apply. Not very realistic. We are still seeing applicants apply, and at the moment it remains unchanged in terms of what we're seeing.
I think, Dom, the important thing here is it's a unique feature for Grenada. certainly. And most of our, truthfully, most of our American clients are going to maintain their U.S. citizenship. It's perfectly legal for Americans to hold dual or sometimes even more than two citizenships, and the vast, vast majority will continue to do so. I think those who renounce, I find, generally already live abroad. They have for 10, 20 years, and they no longer have that close connection maybe with the US, and they're more likely to give it up than those that are currently living in the United States, and the kids are in school and they're still working, etc. I think they're a lot less likely to actually to go that route.
Yep, for sure. And again with Dominica, the sibling aspect of that as well. Being able to, sorry, Antigua, being able to add siblings with Grenada, they share that value of being able to add different family members that go beyond just the spouse and children. So that's quite a key feature. Slightly more expensive the way they're treated in terms of adding a sibling. And lastly,
And
education. Yeah, sorry, John.
I was going to say, yeah, with education opportunities, Grenada has a fantastic medical school that's attended heavily by North American future doctors. And in fact, one out of every 100 North American doctors was trained at the Grenada Medical School. So it's got an excellent school with a really good reputation that's popular.
Great. Qualifies again, standard stuff, main applicant, spouse, dependent children, dependent parents, and as we mentioned, siblings.
I will point out one thing, Dom, with that siblings compared to Antigua. We mentioned Antigua treats a sibling like any other dependent.
Yep.
However, Grenada does have a surcharge of a $75,000 fee per additional sibling. That sibling doesn't need to be like Antigua. They don't need to be financially dependent or anything. They do need to be single, so not married, without children, to be added. But there is that additional fee in Grenada, which tends to make it a little bit more expensive compared to the Antigua program.
Right. And also as well, just a comment maybe about the Grenada's what they're sort of doing with their programs. So they're being very proactive. The Investment Migration Council in London last year, which we attended, the fairly new Prime Minister, a young guy, was full of energy and full of optimism for the country and the program. Really smart guy, and they have a very smart CEO, Thomas Anthony, and they've completely rebranded the CIU to the Investment Migration Agency. So they're one of these countries that they're at the forefront, a bit like St. Kitts, because St. Kitts, to be fair, really started the movement of change. They're really looking to preserve these programs because they're so important. So I have to commend Grenada, and like I said, I did say it's slow, but they are really trying to push through that backlog. So for the extra amount, with the trimmings of the E2, citizenship by descent, education opportunities, you could say, yeah, family of four, it is worth the 200,000 plus. So all these different features we weigh up with our clients at the start, right, to try and funnel it down into one decision because there's a lot to talk about. Main applicant 150, right? So again, you're higher than the last two that we discussed in terms of the donation, right, for a single applicant. Some people say, I think it's worth it because of those trimmings of the E2 and citizenship by descent, etc. But again, 50,000 increase going forward, and I'm sure we'll see something released about the real estate. St. Kitts and Nevis, a well-known holiday destination. If you're flying, Heathrow, BA, British Airways, where I live in London, you'll see lots of brochures on St. Kitts and Nevis. So a lot of holidaymakers from Europe, from the US as well. And it was the first, as John said, it was the first island to structure one of these citizenship by investment programs with the reasoning of diversifying their economy because they were far too reliant on, I think it was sugarcane back then. So they thought, well, how can we actually bring in FDI? Well, what a great way to bring in FDI, right, through this citizenship. So much so that I believe it accounts for 30% of the country's GDP. So very vital to the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis. If we look here, yep, citizenship by descent. So again, has that legacy value. So that's Grenada, Dominica, and St. Kitts that have citizenship by descent in their provisions. In terms of, you see the total number there of the countries visa-free, it does have the most in terms of total countries. And if most of you on this webinar are American citizens, you'll say, I've got a very powerful passport anyway, correct? However, as we saw during COVID, that was stripped in half. So it's always important to consider, I also need a second powerful document, just in case I have to put down my American one and pick up my Antigua or St. Kitts. So we have a country access tool on our website, which you can view, and that gives you a good comparison between two passports, and it tells you, well, what does this have over this one and vice versa? Because you will find some countries that stand out, right? And that can often guide the conversation as well. In terms of the real estate investment there, so you're not restricted by just investing into touristic developments. So a shareholder in a resort or freehold title of a suite in a resort. You can actually buy what they call private home sales. So you can go in and buy a family home. But the issue at the moment is a lot of the stock is having to go through an approval process. So if you actually look at what's available in terms of the private home sale, there's not much. So hopefully we'll see maybe a little bit of a momentum in that. That'll only happen if people start buying real estate through the program, I guess. Yep, qualifications again. Investor is main applicant of us and the client. Children, the range there, parents and grandparents. Yeah, maybe going back to the contextual stuff as well in terms of how does this all kind of come in together. St. Kitts was the first country out of the 5 to really jump ahead into the doubling of the amounts. So in July last year, St. Kitts doubled its amounts. So you saw the contribution double, and you saw the real estate amount double. And to be frank, because we're impartial, right, we've got to discuss all these nations together. It completely hit the volume. Obviously, we see far less clients come through for St. Kitts. There's many reasons why they did this, including these conversations with these European Union and also the US, because one of the principles that the European Union is talking about is we want you to decrease the number of applicants you're approving per annum or per season. How do you do that? Well, you increase the investment amounts, right? So there's a bit of that, but there's also St. Kitts and Nevis, the PM saying, look, we're almost becoming too dependent on the program. So we thought by increasing the amounts, we can look at other areas to bolster our economy. So long and short of it is it has resulted in a decrease in applications, but we'll probably see with the doubling of the others, maybe they'll bring down their pricing to be a bit more competitive with the other programs. But again, time will tell. Nothing's been released. As it stands, St. Kitts and Nevis is far more expensive than the 4 others.
Great.
Yeah, so here you can just see the current thresholds, which we've obviously spoken about in detail, and that June 30th again is officially released as per that MOA that was signed. We're monitoring the situation at the moment, but any prospective clients that don't want to spend 100,000 in the worst scenario, let's start having a consultation. Let's look what you're looking for in terms of the different variables and what suits you better sooner rather than later.
Perfect. Thank you, Dom. I think now that we're coming to the end of the presentation, we can move to our questions. So if you do have a question, please post it into the chat and we'll be able to answer them for you. First question, Dom, I'll ask you here from one of our listeners. What is the most common client nationality you are taking on for these programs?
So to give you a bit of context of how it's changed, a lot of the industry was source markets in Asia. So even in my 6-7 years when I first started with Latitude, it was a lot of Southeast Asia, a lot of central mainland China, and then that kind of came through to Africa. So I had a lot of South African clients, a lot of West African clients, and I'm referring specifically to CBI. So still keeps us busy in terms of that region. But now, hands down, the number one nationality coming through our doors or coming through the inquiries is US citizens. And that has really increased, certainly this year. So I would say hands down in terms of what we're seeing in terms of inquiries coming in, it's the US. And that's only going to get the uptick's going to keep continuing till the end of the year for different reasons.
I think that's a great point. As I mentioned, in my 15 years, it's dramatic change. Nobody believed in the U.S. as a source market 10 years ago, even. We saw that 2 presidential elections ago. We started to see a change. It wasn't a huge change, but that demand started to grow. But it really hasn't slowed. And again, the post-pandemic, we saw that another jump in demand. And I think what our American clients are looking at is, there's geopolitical tensions worldwide, the political divide within the country. You have a lot of different pressure points. And so they're looking at more options for them and their family. And this doesn't restrict to just Americans, it's any nationality. They look, what's their country going to look like in 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now? It's very difficult to predict that. So let's plan ahead. And again, a second citizenship, sometimes our clients feel it's a life insurance policy. You hope, that you have in your back pocket. You hope you never have to use it, but should the time come, you're certainly glad you had the foresight to do so. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Dom.
And just on that note, and it's, you think the main subscribers were, a mix of emerging markets, where they have a weak passport, they have real political instability, like coups and I need to get out of my country. It's now developed markets. It's the US, Canada, and I have clients here in London who are looking at second citizenship. I have German clients, and they're all saying the same thing. I've become too reliant on my home country. If everyone had multiple citizenships, our countries would have to treat us better, right? Because it's no longer a monopoly. It's competitive. It's like a market where countries are competing for their citizens. And again, this is becoming more mainstream now. It sounds wacky, 5 years ago, but it's in the forefront of people's minds. Certainly people that are international and want to protect their wealth and their family.
It's a great answer there, Dom. Going to another question here. Hello, thanks for doing this. When you start taking questions, could you please specify what needs to be submitted by June 30th to take advantage of, in brackets, lock in the current pricing, and what could be submitted afterwards? This is a great question, and it's still a little bit unknown. To give you a bit of context, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, these Caribbean programs fine-tune their programs every few years, and this is just the latest time they're doing it. Traditionally, what they have done is they need to first pass the legislation to enact the price change. And then typically they'll give us a window, maybe it's 60, maybe it's 90 days, to submit a substantially completed application. So while we don't have any confirmation that this is going to be applicable to all 4 of these countries, it is most likely that we will have a little bit more leeway past June 30th to submit a substantially completed application. So something like an 80% of that application done. And then they'll accept it under the current pricing. So that still remains to be seen. As I mentioned, all of these countries still need to pass their legislation, and then they'll announce the changes for that price increase.
And on the document collation side, once you become a client, we discussed the key documents, right? Which is, birth certificate, a copy of passport, police clearance from your home country and any country you've lived in for, say, over 6 months, so in the last 10 years. But we provide full guidance on what you're going to have to procure, in what format. And we really handhold our clients through the process, because you've got to get it done properly, not just for a smooth process, but to have a smooth process when it's with the government. So it's a service-based industry, and we pride ourselves on giving the best advice and also support, sometimes around the clock, in terms of our jurisdictions.
Great. Another question, which we touched on a little bit, but we can go into maybe a bit more depth. What is the reason that so many Americans are joining these programs? Is it politics in America, the economy, possible third world war? Again, in my 15 years in the industry, I've seen a lot of reasons why our clients. Some, they're nervous about the federal debt level. They don't believe it's sustainable, or perhaps the weakening of the dollar, increased inflation. So they're wanting to diversify not just their citizenship, but sometimes that'll open up doors to invest in other countries and get some of their money out of the country and get it to work in a different economy. So certainly there's economic reasons. Again, I think that a lot of our clients are telling us with the politics, it's very divided. It's kind of one side or the other, very polarizing, compared to many other countries who maybe have more of a political spectrum, more than just a two-party system. And they're not happy. And I think things such as social media further that divide with some of our clients. Certainly what I see from some of our Chinese American clients is they are nervous with geopolitical tensions, China, Taiwan, etc. And that makes them nervous. And so they're looking to diversify in case things do escalate. They want to have options. And again, this is like a life insurance policy for some of our clients. They hope they never have to use it, but should the time come, they're certainly glad they had the foresight to obtain it. Anything to add there, Don?
Yeah, it's interesting. I sometimes I hear a new reason every month, and you think, oh, maybe it must be politics that's pushing it with partisan politics that exists in the US. But it's not just the spectrum of politics that's separating people in the US now, is what I'm hearing. It's also just society. It's this kind of tribal society of pressure of you're either this or you're this. And it's just kind of a confluence and a melting pot of scary issues at the moment, right? Even global warming. I have some clients who are speaking of global warming as a reason. Beyond the sort of fires that you get in Canada and also LA. So any reason you can think of, we're hearing them. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Sometimes clients say they're not even sure why, but this is in the back of their head. They're thinking ahead. So another question I think, which is very pertinent, is thanks for your presentation, but could you please advise us what will be the expectation for St. Lucia? So this is a very good question. So as we've identified, 4 of the 5 countries have signed this memorandum of agreement to increase the price. St. Lucia has not. I was just in Dubai for an industry conference the Investment Migration Council hosted, and St. Lucia has strongly indicated that they will be signing in the future, but currently they are prevented from doing so by contractual obligations. So they will raise their price, but not immediately. They have every intention to sign this memorandum of agreement. So what does that mean for St. Lucia? Currently they're looking at probably 12 plus months to process an application. So they are delayed there. And frankly, the harmonization of these 4 other countries, I think it bodes well for their long-term viability of their visa-free travel. Because they're helping to appease some of the concerns different countries or entities have, such as the visa-free travel to Europe. So that's one of the reasons they're increasing their pricing. I think St. Lucia does perhaps run the risk they could lose some visa-free travel if other countries or nations look at their failure to act right away in a negative light. So that, is something to consider when looking at these programs, as the visa-free travel could potentially go down. Again, St. Lucia saying all the right things, that they will sign in the future. We just don't have a date as to when that will be.
And if you look at the EU's visa policy, the way the EU is basically trying to make it more difficult or be able to collect more data on people who are coming in and out. So you'll see they delayed it a year, I believe, but they're bringing in, for example, as a British person has to get a travel authorization to enter the US before they travel. The European Union are trying to do this for passport holders that have visa-free access. So a US national, it's been delayed, I think, a year, or a British national will have to actually apply for an electronic travel authorization before entering the union. So it's not a strange thing that there's more hoops to jump through now with visa-free travel. There's more data being collected. There's more personal profiles being taken into account here. It's the way the whole immigration and freedom of movement is happening. You know, it's developing, and the European Union is trying to be at the forefront of bringing in more control and more data collection, to be honest. So it's not just, you know, they're not just focusing on these countries. It's a general way they're going to view passport holders that have access, which is yeah, I think they have delayed it another year. So it's a huge job, right, to implement that across 27 states. But yeah, let's see if it happens.
Okay, thanks, Dom. Next question. For Antigua, for a family of four, what is the total amount that will need to be paid after all fees, due diligence, interview, etc.? So this is a question that can vary depending on the age of dependents. So generally, there's extra due diligence fees once children reach a certain age, and that varies by the Caribbean country. I'd say currently a good kind of rough estimate for Antigua for a family of four is around 175,000 US. So that's the 100,000 contribution. You have then the due diligence fees, you have the government processing fees, etc. The bank due diligence, our professional fees takes you to around 175. But we're happy to provide detailed cost estimates for anybody who would like. We'll be reaching out to everybody who attended on this webinar, and then you can certainly email us back and let us know what your family dynamic is, the specific ages of any children or et cetera, or siblings that will be included in the application, and we'll send back a detailed cost estimate for you, because it does vary quite greatly depending on the country and of course the age of dependents.
Exactly. And just to comment on that, the structure is the same with all the programs. So the contribution is only paid post approval. Okay. So you don't that figure that John is quoting isn't paid all at once. It's start, middle, and end. Start is usually a retainer fee for us to represent you and build your file. Stage two is the government's fees. We've got to pay the CIU to run your file. And then we wait 5, 8, 9 months. We get the approval letter, then you pay the contribution. So the bulk of that outlay is only paid if you're approved.
Excellent. Next question, asking about the religious makeup in all four areas. I would say the majority is likely Christian Catholic, and then a sputtering of other religions potentially, but for the most part, it's a Christian Catholic countries.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was in Antigua in May, and churches everywhere in terms of in St. John's, you know, that kind of gospel and choir and that sort of environment. And yeah, lots of churches in Antigua.
And then which of the four islands have direct flights abroad, both to and from, without a layover in the United States?
Definitely. Sorry. From
Go
where to
ahead.
where?
Just basically abroad, but not necessarily in the United States.
Well, so for Antigua and St. Kitts, you can go direct from Heathrow in London. That's about a 8 hour journey. In terms of if I'm thinking from Ireland elsewhere, obviously your main airports in the US, Miami and JFK. Further beyond that, I'll be honest. I mean, in Europe, I'm not too sure. I'd probably assume some big European airports.
It does depend on the time of year.
Yeah,
So there are obviously more flights in the tourist season, which tends to run from December into the spring, when it's most popular for people to get away from their cold home cities
right.
and go for a 1 or 2 week vacation in a warm tropical destination. So you have during that time you have direct flights Toronto, New York, Charlotte, Miami, etc. And then, of course, London as well, and some other international destination. But throughout the year, there's certainly direct flights from Miami. American Airlines regularly flies to these destinations. And then you have some of the local carriers as well. And then I don't know if this is more of a comment. It's likely all CBI passports will have Schengen suspension. I would say that could be a misconception. Nothing is certainly set. Again, these countries are all taking, at least 4 of the 5, or all 5, worked with the US State Department to improve their programs last year. So that's the virtual interview, the harmonization of due diligence standards, the inability for one applicant to be rejected and then apply for another one. So they've taken those proactive measures. 4 of the 5 are taking this measure now to raise their minimum price. And this is all to appease some of the concerns that the EU has. And so we're optimistic that the visa-free will continue. I think if you're looking at the 4 countries, or the 5 countries, the one that has the greatest risk is St. Lucia, for the fact that they haven't signed the memorandum yet, and their price increase will be delayed. But certainly for these other 5, I think it bodes well.
Yeah, exactly. And in my opinion on this subject, and it's a topical subject, that risk has been around for years, right? Schengen being able to remove or suspend, right? They usually suspend first, as we saw in Vanuatu. It takes a pretty considerable reason to suspend, like in Vanuatu, they weren't happy with the way that the due diligence was being done. And yes, it's a risk. I mean, we can't control that. It's nothing to do with us. Obviously, as an American, if I am speaking to an American right now, that doesn't affect you. You can still access the Schengen with your US passport. So it's not as impactful on you. Obviously, it is for the locals in each country. But even in the meeting that the EU representative of visa policy had in, I believe it was Barbados earlier this year, January, they did recognize that there is no imminent threat of removal. So there's always been this EU Commission who will continue to try and push for CBI countries not to have access. Now, whether they actually, materialize with their efforts, we don't know. But my point is, at least now it's being discussed. At least now the European reps are sending people over to discuss the longevity of their programs. Whereas before, it was just sort of threats that could happen, right? There was no communication. So I think now that we're seeing communication, I think that's representative of progress.
And I think, yeah, Vanuatu is a citizenship by investment program in the South Pacific, and the EU gave them many warnings about the way they were running their program, that they weren't happy with the due diligence standards. And I think it's quite a different situation than the Caribbean. And certainly the Caribbean, employs third-party due diligence companies to help vet all applicants and their dependents, and that is a level of scrutiny that is higher than what Vanuatu was at the time they lost visa-free travel. So I think these Caribbean programs are much more robust in their due diligence standards, and with these new harmonization of rules and pricing, I think we're going to continue to see improvements. Okay, just going through the questions. We're running a little bit low on time. Dom, what option has been the most popular country for your clients as of late?
So I definitely say Antigua, because our focus has really switched to all of us, serving North America. You have the proximity, you have the lifestyle, you have the family friendly structure. But then maybe one step into that is we do still see most clients going for the contribution option. But we are slowly seeing more investors looking at property. And again, it depends on their profile. If they're looking to spend more time, or they prefer the idea of holding an asset than giving away the money. But I always say, look, you're not giving away the money. Your yield is you're getting citizenship. They say, oh, why would I just give away the money when I can buy real estate? Well, I say the yield is still citizenship. There's more to think about with real estate. You've got to hold it for 5 years. So there's different, it depends on the profile of the applicant. But overall, I'd say if you look at our database, contribution within these programs is the most popular route. And of late, I would say Antigua is the most popular destination, maybe followed closely by Grenada, Dominica.
Great. And again, just another question around the deadline. We still don't have a drop dead date, but if history is any indication, and what we're hearing on the ground in some of these countries is we'll have a window to submit a substantially completed application. However, it's paramount that if you are interested, you get started soon, because it does take time to build a file. There's certain documents you need to order: birth certificates, marriage certificates, college degrees, bank statements, utility bills, etc., police clearance checks. Some of this takes time. They need to be legalized, notarized, apostilled, etc. And sometimes that does take longer in certain countries than others. And so, we've had clients complete an application. The average is usually probably 4 weeks. Certainly, I've had clients do it much quicker when they make this the primary focus. But people get busy. They have other priorities in life. It's not always easy. Sometimes your children are off at university. They're in exams. They're having trouble, getting documents that you need from them. And so the more time we have to work on your application, the higher probability we'll get it submitted in time. And again, hopefully we have a little bit of a window past that June 30th date to submit a substantially completed application. Some programs may require a complete application, but we're hopeful that it'll be a substantially, meaning 80% of that application is done. We're just waiting for a few more of the final documents to come in that had to be ordered, and we're relying on individual states or federal government to legalize certain documents that could take time, and so we can add those to the application after.
Good.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's all the time we have today. Again, Dom and I will be reaching out to you individually. So thank you very much for attending. If you'd like a cost estimate or more information, we can provide that. Just reply to the email. And should you have, again, further questions, we can exchange over email. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Dom, for your help today.
Thank you. Thanks for joining all, and hopefully we'll be able to assist you soon.
Thank you.